I'm quite sure you mean well, Inspector. But if you imagine that I am going to sit back and let everybody regard me as a dotty old maid, you are very much mistaken.
Murder, She Said was an entertaining murder mystery movie from 1961 starring Dame Margaret Rutherford as an elderly but spirited detective who witnesses a murder on a train and, when no one believes her, starts her own investigation by taking the job of a maid at a creepy old mansion in order to solve this mystery herself. I really enjoyed this one, and Margaret Rutherford was really fantastic as the character Miss Marple. I'll give an overview of the film and then follow with some closing thoughts. Well, the film opens up and we see the character Miss Marple. She's settling into her train seat and she's reading a pulp detective novel. And she kind of wakes up after a nap as another train passes by and she sees various passengers go by, including this kid sticking out her tongue at her, to which she responds in kind. Then she sees a murder take place. A woman is strangled, but it's in another train, so nothing can be done. And she reports it later to the conductor, but he's one that seems a little suspicious that maybe this is just the dream of an old spinster who had been reading too many detective novels or something. However, the next day at her home, Inspector Craddock visits, played by actor Charles Tingwell, and basically says, they investigated and they didn't find any clues of a murder, no body was found, and more or less suggests that maybe she was just seeing things. However, she's undeterred, and she goes to visit with her friend, Mr. Stringer, played by actor Stringer Davis, at the local library, and invites him over for buttered crumpets and tea in order to discuss the crime that she has witnessed. And after talking about it, both of them go snooping around the train tracks around the vicinity of where the murder took place, with Miss Marple thinking that maybe the body had been thrown from the train. Well, upon finding some clues, Miss Marple suspects that the body was thrown near this Ackenthorp Hall, but it's one that's blocked by a tall wall and apparently a guard dog. So she finds a way to get a job there as a maid. And when she arrives, it's an impressive and eerie old place. Now she goes to speak with the character Emma Ackenthorp, who's played by the lovely actress Muriel Pavlo, and gets her instructions on what she needs to do and where she will stay. Well, she finds out that one of her responsibilities on this job will be to tend to Ackenthorp Sr., played by actor James Robertson Justice, who is this cranky, bedridden old guy who just gets feisty with his words. But Miss Marple doesn't put up with any of it and is equally quick-witted in her responses to him. It's great stuff. She gets to her room, gets settled in, when she notices someone is spying on her from behind a curtain, but she doesn't cower in fear, but rather grabs a vase to fling at it. I love it. And after this, she grabs a golf club to go and whack whoever it is. Now the door starts to turn and she's about to club the intruder when Miss Emma's nephew, Alexander, played by Ronald Howard, charges in. And honestly, he's a little annoying at times and he's something of a prankster, but he does turn out to be an okay kid who helps Miss Marple out through some of her investigation. The next day, character Dr. Quimper arrives, played by Arthur Kennedy, to go and visit with Mr. Ackenthorp, who he regularly visits, to do medical checks and to give him some medications. Now, Mr. Ackenthorp and Miss Marple have some amusing banter, and the two clearly don't like one another. And I do like Miss Marple's spunk and quick wit throughout this film. Anyhow, Miss Marple takes a break and goes out to practice her golfing, but she uses this as an excuse to go and look around the yard. She's still convinced that the murdered body can be found somewhere. She asks Alexander to hit the ball near some old buildings so that they can go and look around. And as they're kind of creeping around these old buildings that are filled with like Egyptian artifacts and taxidermy and strange stuff like that, they're discovered by the groundskeeper and they have to leave. But later that night, Miss Marple goes back by herself, sneaking around with a flashlight. And as she's looking around through the darkness, she finally discovers the body. So she calls Mr. Stringer and tells him to call the police, not to mention her name. And the next day, Inspector Craddock and his sergeant arrive and start investigating. The doctor suggests that the woman that they have found could be French because of her clothing that she's wearing. Miss Marple tells the inspector in private that she's the one who discovered the body, and at this point the inspector learns that, she's not just an old spinster, and maybe there's more to her than expected. So some time has passed, and the heirs at this place have gathered their dinner. It's basically 4 guys plus Emma, and they're discussing what will happen and who could be guilty of this crime. And then we cut to Emma, who meets with Dr. Quimper, and they embrace in a kiss, but it's only briefly before Emma shares a letter that she has received from a woman in France saying that she was going to visit. Now, the deal here is that this woman supposedly had married one of Ackenthorp's sons, who was killed during the war in France. And if this could be proven, she would have been entitled to part of the share of this estate. So in other words, there's a financial incentive for all of these heirs if she was murdered, you see? So Emma takes this letter to the police. Now later that night, it's dark and stormy, and Miss Marple is setting the table when the power goes out. And she's looking at the fuse box when this Cedric character comes around. He's one of the heirs. He's very suspicious of her. And, you know, how she had just happened to arrive right when a body was found and so on. Well, a little later, Miss Marple hears a noise and goes to investigate and sees Emma clutching her stomach. And it turns out there was a mass poisoning that has taken place at the house. The inspector questions Miss Marple, but she had eaten most of the same food that was served as well, and she's fine, so they don't really suspect her. And she's cleared. Now, a little later, one of the heirs, Harold, is found dead out on the yard with a shotgun wound. So Miss Marple meets with the investigator to declare that she knows who the killer is, and soon she sets in motion her plan to reveal who it is. Now, with not much of the film left, no spoilers, but I'll let you catch the conclusion to this one for yourself. So some closing thoughts about Murder, She Said. The Miss Marple film series has been on my list to check out, and I was really impressed by this one, namely for the amazing performance of Dame Margaret Rutherford. I thought that as an actress, she was amazing here. Very funny in her mannerisms and expressions, very quick-witted, and not someone to back down from a threat, but ready to respond to an intruder with, you know, a golf club to the head if needed. And this was the first of the Miss Marple series of films that she starred in. And I was really impressed, and I'd like to see the other ones. And they were all made in the early 1960s. In doing some of the research of the Miss Marple character over the years, there have been other actresses who have taken on this role as well. Angela Lansbury starred in The Mirror Cracked in 1980. And not long after that, she would be in the TV series very similar in style to the Miss Marple character in Murder, She Wrote, which is sort of a play on the title of this film, Murder, She Said. I used to enjoy watching this series with my grandmother back in the day. And incidentally, it used to bug me that so many people seem to get murdered in the sleepy little town of Cabot Cove, Maine, to the point I'd wonder how anyone was actually alive there. But you know, in researching, it turns out that only 60 people died during the course of the series. You know, taking into account people visiting from other areas or Jessica Fletcher's character traveling to other places and so on. Oh, and if all the killing in Cabot Cove wasn't enough, it's interesting that they also filmed part of the show at Jaws Lake in Universal Studios Hollywood. So you got the murders, and there's also a giant killer shark. So be wary if you ever decide to visit Cabot Cove. Anyhow, actress Helen Hayes also played Miss Marple in some television movies. And in the late 1980s, Joan Hickson played the character in a PBS TV series based on the Agatha Christie books. And in fact, in this film, Joan Hickson actually has a brief role as the character Miss Kidder. So in a funny way, the two Miss Marples actually meet in this film. It's kind of cool. And into the 2000s, there have been other actresses like Geraldine McEwen and Julia McKenzie who have also played the Miss Marple role. And it was interesting to me to discover that when Agatha Christie first saw the film, Murder, She Said, she is quoted as saying, "Oh, this will never do." I love it. And from reviews that I've read, apparently the four Margaret Rutherford Miss Marple films bear very little resemblance to Agatha Christie's books and the character. But this was really good anyway. Charles Kingwell was great as Inspector Craddock, and apparently he's in all four of the Miss Marple films as well, so I'll have to watch for him in future reviews. James Robertson Justice played the grumpy old character Ackenthorp, and I remember him as the guy running the candy factory in the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He was Lord Scrumptious. Remember that bit? Toot sweets, the candy you whistle, the whistles you eat. Yeah, okay. Anyhow, a final note, that actor Stringer Davis was actually married to Margaret Rutherford in real life. And the character Mr. Stringer was not really a character in any of the Agatha Christie novels. but he was just written in as a favor to Margaret Rutherford, which is really cool. He's kind of a funny, nervous character, and there's some genuine, sweet chemistry between the two of them in the film, which was touching when you consider they were actually married in real life. Well, that's Murder, She Said from 1961. It's a fun murder mystery movie starring a very entertaining Margaret Rutherford. It's definitely one worth checking out.